My name is Luna, and I'm about to tell you the craziest story of my life. 6 months ago, I was losing everything: my company, my reputation, my entire future. My biggest rival, Aria, was about to destroy me. So what did I do? I married her. Yes, you heard that right. I married the woman I hated most in this world, and somehow that insane decision became the best thing that ever happened to me. If you want to hear how a marriage of convenience turned into something real, something beautiful, and something absolutely hilarious, keep watching. This is a story about business, rivalry, love, and the moments that change everything. Subscribe now to hear more incredible stories like this one. The glass in my office reflected the Manhattan skyline perfectly. All those glittering buildings representing dreams, ambitions, and in my case, a crumbling empire. I'm Luna Chen, 32 years old, and I was watching my real estate company dissolve like sugar in water. My hands trembled as I read the email from my lawyer for the 100th time that morning. Aria Blackwell, my sworn enemy, had just acquired controlling shares in Meridian Properties, the company that was my biggest client. Without them, I was finished. I'd spent the last decade building Luna Estates from nothing. Every property I touched turned to gold. Every deal I made was strategic, calculated, perfect. I was the queen of New York's real estate scene, until Aria showed up 5 years ago and decided to dethrone me. We were rivals in every sense of the word. She was cold, calculating, and absolutely ruthless. She was everything I hated about the corporate world, and somehow, she was also the only person who could match my ambition step for step. The irony? We'd actually met in business school. Back then, we were friends. Best friends, actually. We studied together, celebrated our successes, supported each other through failures. But somewhere along the way, competition became personal. A deal I won that she wanted. A client she stole from me. Words said in anger that couldn't be taken back. By the time we both entered the real estate market, we were enemies. Pure, unadulterated enemies. Now, sitting in my office on a Tuesday afternoon in September, with the autumn light casting long shadows across my desk, I realized I was about to lose everything. My assistant, James, knocked softly on the door. He looked worried. Everyone looked worried these days. "Ms. Chen, your mother is online too," he said quietly. I closed my eyes. Of course she was. My mother, Patricia, had been calling every day since the news broke. She wanted me to sell, to give up, to accept defeat. But I wasn't built that way. I'd never been built that way. "Tell her I'll call her back," I said, not looking at him. After James left, I pulled up the old files on my computer. Somewhere in the archives of my company, there was something I'd read years ago, an obscure clause in an ancient agreement between my grandfather and Aria's grandfather. Both men had been real estate moguls in the 70s. They'd made a pact, a strange, almost archaic pact, that stated if any direct descendant of their bloodlines married another direct descendant, both family businesses would gain legal protection against hostile takeovers for 2 years. It was ridiculous. It was impossible. It was the only thing that could save me. I stared at my phone for a long time, my finger hovering over Aria's contact. We hadn't spoken in months, not since the charity gala where she'd publicly humiliated me by outbidding me for the Riverside Development Project. I'd walked out of that event with my head held high, but my heart had been shattered. That project was supposed to be mine. My finger trembled as I pressed call. The phone rang 3 times, 4 times. On the 5th ring, I almost hung up. Then she answered. "Luna." Her voice was cool, professional, with that slight edge of amusement that always made my blood boil. What a surprise. Calling to congratulate me on Meridian? We need to talk, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. In person. Tonight. My office. There was a pause. I could almost hear her smiling on the other end. This should be interesting, she said, and hung up. I spent the next 4 hours preparing. I printed the old agreement, had my lawyer verify it was still legally binding, and practiced what I was going to say. By the time Aria walked through my office door at 7 p.m., I'd convinced myself this was a rational business decision. It was a strategy, nothing more. She looked stunning, as always. Aria had this effortless elegance that made me want to scream. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and she wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her green eyes I used to love, back when we were friends, surveyed my office with that familiar expression of cool superiority. So, she said, sitting down without being invited, you're finally ready to admit defeat? I took a breath and laid out the agreement on my desk. I'm ready to propose something insane, I said, and I need you to listen before you laugh. Aria read the agreement 3 times. I watched her face carefully, trying to gauge her reaction. Her expression didn't change, that infuriating, controlled expression she'd perfected over years of high-stakes negotiations. When she finally looked up, there was something in her eyes I couldn't quite identify. Amusement? Curiosity? Pity? You're joking, she said flatly. I'm not. You want to marry me? She said it like she was stating a fact, like I'd just told her the sky was blue. I want to save my company, I corrected. And yes, technically that means marrying you. For 2 years. It's a business arrangement, nothing more. Aria stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the city lights. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. I could see her reflection in the glass, her jaw clenched, her fingers drumming against her thigh. She was thinking. Aria always thought before she spoke, which was one of the things that made her so dangerous in negotiations. Why would I do this? She finally asked. I'm winning, Luna. I'm about to absorb your company completely. In 6 months, Luna Estates will be nothing but a footnote in my portfolio. Because, I said, standing up to face her, you're not actually winning. Not yet. And you know it. If you absorb me now, there will be lawsuits, regulatory investigations, questions about whether you used insider information or unfair business practices. It'll be messy. It'll take years. But if we marry, both our companies get protection. We both win. We both survive. She turned to face me, and I saw something flicker across her face. Doubt, maybe. Or recognition that I was right. And what happens after 2 years? She asked. We divorce. Quietly. We both move on. We both have our companies intact. People will talk, she said. People always talk. We'll tell them it was a whirlwind romance that didn't work out. It happens all the time in New York. Aria walked back to my desk and picked up the agreement again. I could see her mind working, calculating, weighing the pros and cons like she always did. This was the Aria I remembered from business school. Brilliant, strategic, always thinking 3 steps ahead. If I do this, she said slowly, we need rules, clear boundaries. This is business, nothing more. Of course, I agreed, relief flooding through me. We tell no one the real reason, not our families, not our friends, not our employees. As far as the world is concerned, we fell in love. Agreed. We live together. We have to make this convincing. My stomach did a little flip at that, but I kept my expression neutral. Where? My place in Brooklyn. It's bigger, and it's neutral ground. Neither of us has too much history there. I nodded. even though the thought of moving into Aria's apartment made me want to throw up. Or maybe that was just the stress. Probably the stress. We attend events together. We post on social media. We do couple things, she continued, pacing now, her mind clearly in full strategic mode. But we maintain separate bedrooms. We maintain our privacy. And we absolutely, under no circumstances, let this become anything other than what it is, a business arrangement. Agreed, I said again. She extended her hand. Then we have a deal, Ms. Chen. I took her hand, and the moment our skin touched, I felt that familiar electric shock that I'd felt years ago when we were friends. I pushed it down, buried it deep. This was business. Nothing more. We have a deal, Ms. Blackwell, I said. What I didn't tell her was that I'd already started falling in love with her again the moment she walked into my office. What I didn't tell her was that I'd never actually stopped loving her. Not really. Not even when we were enemies. What I didn't tell her was that this marriage of convenience might be the most dangerous thing I'd ever done. We got married 3 weeks later at City Hall. Just the two of us. A witness we paid $50, and a judge who barely looked up from his paperwork. No flowers, no dress, no romance. Just two women in business suits signing a document that would change everything. Aria wore a navy suit that made her eyes look impossibly green. I wore black, because I was still in mourning for the life I thought I was going to have. We didn't kiss. We didn't even smile for the photos. It was the most joyless wedding in the history of weddings. But when the judge pronounced us married, when Aria's hand found mine, when she looked at me with those green eyes and I saw something that might have been fear or might have been hope, I knew I was in trouble. Deep, catastrophic, utterly unavoidable trouble. Moving into Aria's apartment in Brooklyn was like moving into a museum designed by someone with impeccable taste and zero personality. Everything was white, gray, or black. Everything was expensive. Everything was cold. It was exactly what I would have expected from her, and it made me want to cry. You can have the guest bedroom, she said, showing me around on my first night. It has an ensuite bathroom, so we won't have to share. There's a home office if you need to work. The kitchen is fully stocked. Help yourself to anything. Anything? I asked, trying to inject some levity into the situation. She gave me a look that could have frozen lava. Anything except my coffee. I have a specific brand I order from a roaster in Portland, and I'm very particular about it. Of course you are, I muttered. What was that? Nothing. Thank you for the tour. That first week was torture. We were living in the same apartment, but we barely saw each other. Aria left early for work and came home late. I did the same, partly because I was genuinely busy trying to save my company, and partly because I couldn't handle being around her. Every time I saw her, every time I caught a whiff of her perfume or heard her laugh on a phone call, I felt that pull, that dangerous, impossible pull toward someone I was supposed to hate. On Friday night, I was making dinner in the kitchen, pasta, nothing fancy, when Aria came home. She stopped in the doorway, staring at me like I'd just set the apartment on fire. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Making dinner. I'm hungry. Do you want some?" No, I was going to order something." "There's plenty," I said, trying to sound casual. "It's just pasta." She stood there for a moment, clearly wrestling with something. Then she surprised me by sitting down at the kitchen counter. "Okay," she said. "Fine. I'll eat your pasta." We ate in silence for the first few minutes. Then Aria asked me about my day, and I asked her about hers, and suddenly we were having an actual conversation. Not a fight, not a negotiation, just a conversation. She told me about a difficult client, and I told her about a property I was trying to save. She laughed, actually laughed, at a joke I made about our realtor's terrible fashion sense. For a moment, just a moment, it felt like we were friends again. Then her phone rang. She checked it, and her expression hardened. She excused herself and took the call in her bedroom, and when she came back, the walls were up again. The moment had passed, but something had shifted. After that night, we started having dinner together more often. We'd cook or order in, and we'd talk. Real conversations. Aria told me about her childhood, about how her father had pushed her to be the best at everything, about how she'd learned to see business as a war where there could only be one winner. I told her about my mother's disappointment when I chose business over marriage, about how I'd always felt like I had to prove myself, had to be perfect, had to win. We were learning each other again. Or maybe, I thought, we were learning each other for the first time. 2 weeks into our arrangement, we had to attend a charity gala together. This was the real test, going public, making people believe we were a couple. I spent 3 hours getting ready, trying on dresses, doing my makeup, attempting to look like a woman who was happily married to her rival. When Aria saw me, she actually stopped talking mid-sentence. "You look," she started, then seemed to catch herself. "You look nice." "You too," I said, and I meant it. She was wearing a midnight blue gown that hugged her curves perfectly, and her hair was down, falling in waves past her shoulders. She looked like a goddess, and I hated her for it. At the gala, we played the part perfectly. We held hands. We laughed at each other's jokes. We posed for photos with our arms around each other. And the worst part? It didn't feel like acting. It felt real. When Aria's hand found the small of my back as we walked through the crowd, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "People are watching," she whispered in my ear. "We need to look more comfortable together." "I am comfortable," I whispered back. She pulled away slightly and looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that made my heart stop. Vulnerability. Fear. The same fear I was feeling. "Don't," she said softly. "Don't what?" "Don't make this harder than it already is." Before I could respond, someone called her name, and the moment shattered. We spent the rest of the night performing, and it was the most exhausting thing I'd ever done. By week 6 of our marriage, the cracks were starting to show. Not in our public persona, that was flawless, but in private, in the apartment, in the spaces between us. Things were falling apart. It started with small things. I'd find her coffee mug in the sink and wash it, even though she'd specifically told me not to touch her things. She'd leave her jacket on the couch, and I'd hang it up in her closet, even though it wasn't my place. We were invading each other's spaces, literally and figuratively, and neither of us knew how to stop it. Then came the night I found her crying in the kitchen at 2 a.m. I'd gotten up for water and found her sitting at the counter in the dark, her face illuminated only by the light from the refrigerator. She was holding a photo, an old photo, from our business school days. It was the two of us, laughing, with our arms around each other. "Aria?" I said softly. She jumped, quickly wiping her eyes and shoving the photo away. "I couldn't sleep," she said, her voice tight. "I was just remembering." I sat down next to her, and we didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, "Do you remember when we were friends? When we actually liked each other?" "Of course I do," I said. "What happened to us, Luna? How did we become enemies?" I thought about that question. How did we become enemies? Was it the deal I won? Was it the client she stole? Or was it something deeper? Something we'd both been running from? "I think," I said slowly, "we were always too similar. We wanted the same things. We were driven by the same fears, And instead of supporting each other, we started competing. And then competition became personal. And then we forgot why we'd ever been friends in the first place. Aria looked at me, and her eyes were wet with tears. "I've missed you," she said quietly. "I've missed you so much." My heart broke. Actually, physically broke in my chest. Because I'd missed her too. I'd missed her every single day for the past 5 years. "Aria," I started, but she stood up abruptly. "I'm going to bed," she said. "We shouldn't talk about this. It's not part of the arrangement." "Maybe it should be," I said. "No," she said firmly. "It shouldn't. In 2 years, we're done. We're divorced. We're strangers again. We can't afford to feel anything real." But it was too late. We were already feeling something real. I could see it in her face, in the way her hands trembled, in the way she couldn't quite meet my eyes. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. She left a note saying she had an early meeting and wouldn't be home until late. I didn't see her for 3 days. She was avoiding me, and I couldn't blame her, because if she stayed, if we kept having moments like that, the whole arrangement was going to fall apart. I threw myself into work. I spent 14-hour days at the office, negotiating deals, closing sales, trying to rebuild my company. And it was working. With the legal protection from the marriage, I was able to take risks I couldn't have taken before. I closed 3 major deals in a month. Luna Estates was coming back to life, but I was dying inside. On the 4th night, I came home to find Aria cooking dinner. Not ordering in, not eating separately, but actually cooking. The apartment smelled like garlic and tomatoes and something that smelled like home. "I thought we could talk," she said, not looking at me. "About the arrangement, about what happens next." My heart sank. She was going to end it early. She was going to ask for a divorce. "Okay," I said, sitting down at the counter. She plated the pasta and set it in front of me, then sat down across from me with her own plate. We ate in silence for a few minutes, and then she said, "My father called today. He wanted to know when he could meet you properly. He's suspicious. He thinks this marriage is too convenient." "What did you tell him?" "I told him the truth, that I married the woman I love." I looked up from my pasta, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. "I told him," she continued, still not looking at me, "that I married you because I've been in love with you for 5 years. That I've been in love with you since the day we became enemies, because I realized that the only person who could match me, who could challenge me, who could make me want to be better, was you, and I was too scared to admit it, so I turned it into competition instead." "Aria, let me finish," she said. "I know this wasn't part of the arrangement. I know we said this was just business, but I can't do this anymore. I can't live in the same apartment with you, cook dinner with you, wake up in the morning knowing you're just down the hall and pretend I don't feel anything. It's killing me." I set down my fork carefully. "What are you saying?" She finally looked at me, and her eyes were fierce and terrified and hopeful all at once. "I'm saying that I want to renegotiate the terms of our marriage. I'm saying that I want this to be real. I'm saying that I'm in love with you, and I think you might be in love with me too, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise." I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I could only stare at her, this woman who'd been my enemy and my friend and my rival, and somehow, without me even realizing it, had become the person I loved most in the world. "Say something," she said, her voice small and vulnerable. "I'm terrified," I said. "I know. What if we ruin this? What if we try to make it real and it falls apart? Then it falls apart, she said. But at least we'll have tried. At least we won't spend the rest of our lives wondering what if. I stood up and walked around the counter to her. I took her face in my hands and I kissed her. It was soft and tentative at first, like we were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But then she kissed me back, and it was like coming home. 6 months later, Aria and I renewed our vows. Not at City Hall this time, but at the Plaza Hotel, with 200 of our closest friends and family members in attendance. My mother cried. Aria's father gave a speech that made everyone laugh and cry simultaneously. And I stood there in a white dress that cost more than my first car, looking at the woman I'd married as my enemy and was now choosing to marry as my love, and I felt like the luckiest person alive. The irony, of course, was not lost on me. We'd gotten married to save our companies, and instead, we'd saved each other. Our companies merged 6 months after that. Luna Estates and Blackwell Properties became Blackwell Chen Developments, and we became the most powerful real estate duo in New York. But more importantly, we became partners in the truest sense of the word. We built something together, not just a business, but a life. A year into our real marriage, Aria proposed to me. Properly proposed, with a ring and everything. We were in Paris, standing on the Pont des Arts, and she got down on one knee and asked me to marry her again. I said yes, obviously. And then I cried. And then we both cried. And a street musician played the most beautiful rendition of La Vie en Rose I've ever heard. 2 years after our original marriage, the exact point where we were supposed to divorce, we renewed our vows again. This time, we did it on a beach in Santorini, with just the two of us and an officiant we'd hired. We exchanged new rings, new promises, new commitments. And when the officiant asked if I took Aria to be my wife, I laughed and said, "I've already taken her twice. I'm not stopping now." The best part, the absolute best part, was the day Aria's father called to tell us he was retiring and wanted us to take over his entire real estate empire. And my mother called to say she was proud of me, not because I'd saved my company, but because I'd found love. Life is funny, isn't it? You spend 5 years hating someone, convinced they're your greatest enemy, and then you marry them to save your business. And then you fall in love with them for real, and then you realize that they were never your enemy at all. They were just the person you were meant to find. 3 years into our marriage, we bought a brownstone in Brooklyn, not far from Aria's old apartment, actually. We renovated it together, arguing about paint colors and tile choices and whether we really needed a wine cellar. We did, obviously. We filled it with plants and art and photos of us at various stages of our relationship. We adopted a dog named Merger because we're both terrible at naming things. We built a life together, brick by brick, decision by decision, love by love. And yes, we still argue. We still compete. We still drive each other absolutely crazy sometimes. But now we do it as partners. We do it as people who've chosen each other, not once, but over and over again. The other day, Aria was teasing me about a deal I'd lost to a competitor, and I threw a pillow at her, and she threw it back, and we ended up on the couch laughing until we couldn't breathe. And I thought about that day in my office when I'd called her, desperate and terrified, asking her to marry me. I thought about how insane that decision seemed at the time. How impossible. How wrong. But it was the most right thing I've ever done. So here's what I learned. Sometimes the person you think is your greatest rival is actually your greatest love. Sometimes the thing that saves you isn't what you expect it to be. Sometimes the best business decision you can make is to take a chance on love. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to marry your best friend twice. Aria is in the kitchen right now, making her famous pasta carbonara. I can hear her humming. The dog is at her feet, hoping for scraps. The sun is setting over Brooklyn, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. And I'm sitting here, writing this, thinking about how grateful I am for that moment of desperation that led me to call her. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for staying with me through all 5 chapters of this crazy, beautiful, ridiculous journey. If you loved Luna and Aria's story as much as I loved living it, please subscribe to this channel. We have so many more stories to tell, so many more lives to explore, so many more reminders that love is always worth the risk. Because at the end of the day, the only way to save your business might be to marry your biggest rival. But the way to save your life? That's to let yourself love them.